The hunt for rare action figures often feels like an uphill battle. Regardless of the toy line, it often feels like something of a victory once a toy enthusiast has successfully chased down and added their white whale to their personal collection. I've generally maintained that the acquisition of hard-to-find Holy Grail type items is more special if you as a collector have some attachment to the character at hand, and if the figure is more obscure or serves as a unique variant of an already existing well-known character, there's often a special story behind the procurement of said toy rather than making a purchase simply for the sake of obtaining something rare. That'll be the case for the list that I've put together here today, where I go through yet another assembly of rare Transformers that I've acquired into my own collection. So strap in for this exciting ride, because this is a Toy Kennections Top 10 Countdown. Because collections tend to evolve and grow, if you've been following the channel for some time, you'll be aware that I did a similar list like this back in 2021. A list that I'm proud of, but hopefully comes across as something passionate and organic rather than you as viewers just watching another collector gloat about expensive toys. I'll be sure to leave a link to that older countdown video in the description below. Since that period, I've managed to acquire enough items to make another top 10 list, so treat this as a sequel of sorts. I've assembled this list in a manner whereby price and rarity are not the only criteria, but also the fluctuating difficulty and journey it took to hunt down these figures. This will be a list of not only G1 Transformers, but also pre-Transformers from before the establishment of the official Hasbro and Takara licensed brand that utilized the pre-existing figure molds. But anyway, onwards and upwards with our list, beginning with number 10. The Macross VF1S Armored Valkyrie by Takatoku Toys. Released in the early 1980s as a forerunner to the eventual 1985 Transformers Jetfire, my version here is of the GBP-1S armor set rather than the Super Valkyrie armor set that was directly recolored into Jetfire. Nevertheless, the base toy is the same as the Transformers Hasbro release, and what I like about this Valkyrie is that it fits in nicely not only with any existing Macross or Robotech collection, but can also sit with your Transformers in a manner similar to the Diaclone or Microman toys that also became Transformers characters during the mid-80s. With a gorgeous box and an amazing display presence, I would have been tempted to rank this item higher on the list, but since my own personal difficulty of acquiring this piece is part of the factors that I'm listing here, I will note that this is an unusual case of a toy almost literally landing in my lap, since a longtime friend and channel follower offered this up to me in a trade whereby what I traded away to acquire this toy was significantly less than the open market value of this fantastic Valkyrie. However, my friend and I both knew this going in, and he considered this deal as a partial trade, partial donation into the channel. So thanks again to my friend Garman, an individual I have actually known since the 1990s, for his generosity in getting this figure into the Toy Kennections toy collection. You can also learn more about the VF1S Valkyrie and its transition into becoming Jetfire in my Story of Jetfire, a history video I released back in 2022. For number 9, the Diaclone Triceratops, released as Dinosaur Robo in its Japanese Takara release, or as Dinosauro Robot for its Italian release by the company Gig, which is the version that I have here. You'll more likely recognize this as the eventual Dinobot Slag. As a predecessor to the Transformers Dinobot, one thing you'll notice right away is the blue colored launcher and silver chromed sword that differ from the more familiar G1 release, not to mention the largely blue color scheme in robot mode, the silver horns in Triceratop mode, and of course the addition of a Diaclone driver. With the Dinobots being as popular as they are, it's always neat to see the figures that came before them. I acquired this from a local collector named Kevin, who sold me most of the figure, and my buddy Jeff sourced me the Diaclone driver. One thing of note is the bopper-style missiles released with the Italian Diaclone figures in place of the more traditional type missiles. In at number 8, we have Sky Garry, a 1991 release whose story is told through the Japanese-only Return of Convoy manga. Sky Garry was part of an Autobot faction known as the Battlestars. The story of how I got this toy is that it's actually the second time I have owned one, seeing as I had one back in 2005, sold it many years later, and realized I liked the item enough to reacquire it much later. Interestingly, there's also a story of how a large storage of leftover mint-in sealed box Sky Garry figures was found back in the mid-late 2000s. Thus, for a period of time his rarity decreased, making him an easier find on the secondary market. However, as that discovery was a long time ago now, it's getting harder and harder again to find him in the aftermarket. While the one that I own now came in an opened box, I speculate that this particular Sky Garry came from that 2000s storage find, seeing as the box is virtually in mint shape, with all the paperwork also in good shape and unapplied stickers, which is not something that I would expect if the toy had been played with and if it had been circulated into the market back during its initial 1991 release. Number 7. The Defensor gift set in a Canadian box. Yes, I know at first glance and without much research into its history, you'd think that this would have a lower spot on the list, and I thought the same initially as well. The story here is that back in 1986, Defensor's combiner brother Superion was released first, and sales did not perform well in American markets. As such, Defensor's gift set box only saw a very limited release rather than being produced in regular quantities, thus making it ultra rare. And since an American Defensor gift box is so hard to find, to the point that even some of the most high-end collectors can't seem to acquire one, many collectors who collect exclusively American released boxes have gone out and bought a bilingual Canadian boxed one instead, like the one that I've shown here. Thus, all these aforementioned factors result in this being a difficult find on the secondary market. So yes, while a loose Defensor himself is a relatively easy find, the gift set box and foam are not. In my own case, I acquired this from my friend Jeff, who decided to sell this one off after finding the even rarer American box for his own collection. Hey, as rare as my version is, there's always other collectors out there with even harder to find stuff. For number 6, we have GoShooter from 1988. A character in the Japanese Transformers Masterforce cartoon of the same year, GoShooter was a headmaster who took the personality of Shuta, the human that he was bonded to. You'll notice that the GoShooter toy was released as and more commonly known as Siren in American markets. He had a bit of a different color scheme, with GoShooter being a lighter shade overall. The accessories are small and could be easily lost, but I was lucky enough to find this one in complete condition and at a more than reasonable price from a local Facebook Marketplace seller. And before we get into the top 5, I'd just like to give a special shout out and thank you to the Patreon supporters and channel members of the Toy Kennections YouTube channel. You can become a patron yourself by going to patreon.com/toykennections, where you can unlock exclusive content and other benefits, or click the join button next to my channel name to unlock exclusive badges and custom emojis for your use in the comments section of any Toy Kennections video or live stream. Alright, into the top 5 with number 5, the yellow Diaclone Countach, the Lamborghini who would eventually become Sideswipe in the 1984 Generation 1 toy release. This yellow stud and his Diaclone driver were a purchase from my friends at Cherry Bomb Toys during a local toy show we both vended at and attended. I know that this Diaclone figure was reissued many years later under the name of Tiger Track, a name that has stuck with him among fan circles when referring to him after the fact. Now, the Diaclone car robots one that I have here is of the vintage one, and honestly I could have maybe ranked him a spot higher if they hadn't reissued the figure in this exact same original style and mold later on. Unfortunately, I don't have the rest of his accessories, most notably the hard to find shoulder launcher, but as I had never seen one of these in person before, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to acquire this fantastic piece into my collection. At number 4, another Diaclone figure, the Toyota HIlux, also from the early 80s car robots subset. Like many of the Diaclone figures out there, he came in more than one color, but the blue one is the one that happens to be in my collection. You'll recognize him immediately as the precursor to the rugged force field wielding Autobot named Trailbreaker, and he sports a driver/pilot much like the other Diaclone releases. This was another purchase from my local friend Kevin, one of the more high-end pre-Transformer collectors that I know, and when I heard that he wanted to sell this figure, I drove to his home the same night to pick it up. It's honestly not a figure I see very often, and the first time I ever saw one in person. And before we round our way into the top 3, I'd just like to ask all of you as viewers, which of these figures happens to be your favorite among this list? Whether you've heard about them before or whether you're hearing about them for the first time through this video. You can put your answer into the comment section below. And with that, let's talk about the top 3. In the third slot, we have Greatshot from the 1989 line of figures, who also appeared in the Transformers Victory cartoon. A recolor and slight retooling of the more familiar 1987 six-shot figure, Greatshot could also transform into 6 modes, albeit he was an Autobot and not a Decepticon. In the Victory series cartoon, Greatshot took over the leadership mantle of the secondary Autobot army after the death of God Jinrai, and at times worked closely with Starsaber and the primary Autobot army. This is yet another figure that I have hardly ever seen in person, let alone something with a good condition box and paperwork like this. Now in the runner-up spot, the giant Autobot Grand Maximus from 1988. A recolor of his city-sized brother Fortress Maximus from a year earlier, Grand Maximus was another who was only released in Japan. He was a bit different from Fortress Maximus, not only due to his color scheme, but that his headmaster had a Pretender shell. The acquisition of this was such that I saw the figure locally back around 2003 or 2004, and that figure was already sold, and I simply saw the figure in another person's collection afterwards. This is maybe the third one I've seen in hand and in person, and being a local purchase again off of my good friend Jeff, who upgraded his own version because he happened to find one in slightly better condition. He might actually be my most expensive Transformer, but with the fluctuating nature of pricing in the toy market, that is a factor that can change at any moment. When I made my video about the acquisition of this figure a while ago, one of the things I mentioned was the sheer length of time between seeing it for the first time and getting it into the collection, making this purchase all the more special. And of course, we've now counted down to the top spot, so let's look behind the curtain at which of my latest list of rare Transformers came in at number 1. Diaclone Battle Convoy. If you followed this channel for a while, you may have seen a previous video I did on this figure and are not surprised that I ranked him in this top spot. Since the time of the initial purchase, I have been able to locate 2 of the 3 original Diaclone drivers that he came with, thus making it that much closer to getting him complete. But for those who are aware of my sheer love for toy histories and what certain items represent in terms of the importance of the toys we have come to know and love, you'll know that my appreciation for this Optimus Prime Forerunner knows no bounds. The fact that there was a non-sentient truck robot that formed the basis for the now legendary Generation 1 Autobot leader, and the fact that I can look at my display and know that this is where the Transformers started, all this just elevates this figure and its stature to me. Before I sat down to make this video, I elected not to look up the recent value of the Diaclone Battle Convoy on the open market. The fact is, it just wouldn't matter to me anyway. The sentimental value of what this toy signifies in the deep and rich history of the action figure industry is enough to rank it this high. In fact, it makes it priceless to me and arguably the most prized piece in my collection. Yes, the box has seen better days, but it's my box, and this is my Battle Convoy. For that reason, he was the only figure who could top this list. In any case, hopefully this top 10 ranking was a worthwhile experience for you, and be sure to list any holy grails you're looking to acquire or have recently acquired into your own collection if you yourself are a Transformers collector. And that was my latest list of 10 rare Transformers in my vintage collection. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see other related top 10 countdown videos, I'm going to leave a Toy Kennections top 10 themed playlist right over here. Or you can click on another Transformers related video right over here. And with that, let's transform and roll out into the next video. See you next time.